Welcome to El-Shaddai Academy, where maths made easy. In today's class, we are to talk about indices. Before we go into solving problems about indices, let's look at the word indices. Indices is a short form of expressing numbers, which is the plural form of index. Let's look at the word indices mathematically. Mathematically, if they say 10, that is, if they say 1000 times 100 times 1000, to express this in indices, you have to say 10 raised to the power of 2 times 10 raised to the power of 3, because here are 2 zeros are here, so 10 is to raise the power of 2. When you see 10 raised to the power of 2, note that here we have 2 zeros, that is 10, that is 100. Here we have 3 zeros, that is 1000. Any place you see 10 raised to the power of 3 is 1000. This is to express indices in a mathematical way. Now, if you say 10, if you say 100 times 1000, what do you going to have? You have that is, you have 100,000. Then from this one that is indices now, just take one of the base, add their powers. 2 plus 3, add their powers. When you add their powers, this is 1, this is 10 raised to the power of 5, which is now telling you that here we have 5 zeros. And if you see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and from here to is 5 zeros. Let's look at laws of indices. Laws of indices is the basic law of mathematics, which used to express the power numbers that raise to the powers. So now let's look at laws of indices. Laws of indices. The number one law of indices is product law of indices. Product law of indices. Product law of indices says when a raised to the power of n times a raised to the power of m is the same thing as a raised to the power of n plus m. This is what product law says. Anything raised to the power, there are two numbers which are the same basis. The two numbers are the same basis raised to the such power. You will just pick one of their base and add their powers. Let's look at example that will explain more about indices, more about product law of indices. Example. 10 raised to the power of 2 times 10 raised to the power of 5 is the same thing as 10 plus raised to the power of 2 plus 5. 2 plus 5. Note that here is 5. 10 raised to the power of 2 plus 5. Then you will have 10 raised to the power of 2 plus 5 will have 7. This is the answer for product law of indices. So now let's look at another example that will show us very well the work of product law in indices. Now 4 raised to the power of 3 times 4 raised to the power of 4. This is the same thing as 4 raised to the power of 3 plus 4. This is now 4 equals to 4 raised to the power of 7. And this is our final answer. Now, let's go to the number 2 law of indices. Number 2 law of indices talk about division law of indices. Division law. The division law says when a raised to the power of n divided by a raised to the power of m is the same thing as a raised to the power of n minus m. The bases are the same. Take one of the base and subtract their powers. This is division law of indices. Now let's look at example 10 raised to the power of 4. 10 raised to the power of 3 divided by 10 raised to the power of 4. These are the bases, they are the same. So take one of their bases, which is 10, then subtract their powers, which is 3 minus 4. 3 minus 4 is the same thing as 10 raised to the power of negative 1. When you say 10 raised to the power of negative 1 now, this is now 1 over 10. And this is the answer for this one. Let's look at another example. Just take one of their bases. Take one of their bases and subtract their powers, which is 4. Let's short this one down. Let's put this one as 2, which is 4 minus 2 is equals to 5 raised to the power of 2. When you say 5 raised to the power of 2, you have 25. This is the answer. Then let's go to number 3 law of indices. Let's look at number 3 law of indices. Number 3 law of indices is 0 law of indices. 0 law. Number 3 law of indices is 0 law of indices. 0 laws of indices says when a raised to the power of 0 is the same thing as 1. Anything raised to the power of 0 is 1. So let's look at example 5 raised to the power of 0 is the same thing as 1. 100 raised to the power of 0 is the same thing as 1. 1 million raised to the power of 0 is the same thing as 1. This is what 0 law of indices says. Let's go to number 4. Number 4 law of indices. Unity law. Unity law says when a raised to the power of 1 is the same thing as a raised to the power of 1 is the same thing as a. Anything raised to the power of 1 is the same thing as the number. Any number, even though it's 1 million, 10 billion raised to the power of 1 is also 1 billion. Let's look at example. 100 raised to the power of 1 is the same thing as 100. The same thing as 100. 5 raised to the power of 1 is the same thing as 5. This is what unity law says about indices. Let's go to number 5. Number 5 law of indices. The root law says when a raised to the power of half is equal to square root of a. When a raised to the power of half is the square root of a. Now let's look at example that will explain about root law of indices. 9 raised to the power of half is the same thing as root 9. Another example, let's say 5 raised to the power of half is the same thing as root 5. Let's say 100 raised to the power of half is the same thing as root 100. This is what root law of indices said. Let's go to number 6 law of indices. Negative law says when a raised to the power of negative 1 is the same thing as 1 divided by a. It's the same thing as 1 divided by a. Remember, this is a, it's not 9, it's a. Now, let's look at example. 5 raised to the power of negative 1 is the same thing as 1 over 5. Another example. 6 raised to the power of negative 1 is the same thing as 1 over 6. Let's move to number 7 law of indices. Number 7 law of indices talk about the negative power law of indices. Negative power law says when a raised to the power of 2, negative 2, when a raised to the power of negative 2 is the same thing as 1 over a raised to the power of 2. The same thing as 1 over a raised to the power of 2. Now let's look at example. Example 9 raised to the power of negative 2 is the same thing as 1 over 9 raised to the power of 2. Let's go to another example. 10 raised to the power of negative 2 or negative 3 is the same thing as 1 divided by 10 raised to the power of 3. This is what negative power law says in indices. Let's go to number 8 law of indices. Number 8 law of indices is fraction law of indices. Fraction law of indices. Fraction law of indices. Fraction law of indices says when a raised to the power of x divided by y is the same thing as the y root. Is the same thing as the y root of a raised to the power of x. When a raised to the power of x divided by y, this is a fraction. A divided by x divided by y is a fraction. Anything raised to the power of a fraction, you will just say the y root of x raised to the power of 3. Let's look at example. 5 raised to the power of 2 over 3 is the same thing as the cube root. The cube root of 5 raised to the power of 2. This is a fraction law of indices. Let's move to number 9 law of indices. Power product law. Power product law says when bracket x y raised to the power of 2 is the same thing as x raised to the power of 2 times y raised to the power of 2. Everything inside the bracket is going to affect with the power. So let's look at example. 5a raised to the power of 2 is the same thing as 5 raised to the power of 2 times a raised to the power of 2. 5 raised to the power of 2 is now 25. A raised to the power of 2. Number 1 problem is 2a times brackets 3a raised to the power of 2. Let's see solution. We shall say 2 times a times 3 raised to the power of 2 times a raised to the power of 2. Now, what you need to do is correct like terms. This is 2. This is 2 times 3 raised to the power of 2 times a raised to the power of 1 times a raised to the power of 2. From here, you can say 2 times 3 raised to the power of 2 is 9. 9 times a raised to the power of 1 plus 2. These numbers, they have the same base. Since they have the same base, take one of their base and add their powers. You can say now 2 times 9 will have 18. Then 18 times a. 1 plus 2 will have 3. And this is the final answer. Another example, which is example number 4a raised to the power of 3b times 3a raised to the power of minus 2. Solution. 4 times a raised to the power of 3 times b times 3 times a times b raised to the power of negative 2. Now, correcting of like terms, note that this b is having the power of 1, and this a is also having the power of 1. Now, let's collect like terms. 4 times 3 times a raised to the power of 3 times a raised to the power of 1 times b raised to the power of 1 times b raised to the power of negative 2. Now, when you say 4 times 3, you will have 12. These numbers, these guys, they are having the same basis. Take one of their base and add their powers. This is a raised to the power of 3 plus 1 times these guys, they are having the same base. Take one of their base and add their powers, which is 1 minus 1 plus negative 2. So now 12 times a. 3 plus 1 will have 4 times, if you say 1 positive times negative is equals to negative. This is negative 2. Then we shall have 12 times a raised to the power of 4 times b raised to the power of -1. Then from here we shall have 12 times a raised to the power of 4 divided by b, because we have to get rid of this negative sign, or you can still put it like this: 12 times a raised to the power of 4 times 1 over b. This is our final answers. Try this. This is 3a times bracket 5a raised to the power of 2. Try this and leave your answer in the comment section. If you enjoy our class, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, comment and share.